Welcome everyone. Today's webinar will begin shortly. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. We are so excited to team up with Co-op Cincy, Sankofa Research Institute, and Community Care Cooperative this afternoon for a conversation on building Black and African American led cooperatives. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Liz and I'm going to run through just a few housekeeping items before we get started here. So our webinar this afternoon is scheduled for an hour. We do have 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. So we encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar. You can type them into the chat box or the Q&A box. Our team will be monitoring that conversation and we'll do our best to get to as many of your questions as possible during those final 15 minutes of Q&A session at the end. And so to get us started this morning, I'm going to hand things over to our moderator, Stacy Johnson. She is Manager of Membership and Sponsorship at NCBA CUSA, and she's going to be leading our conversation today. Stacy.
Welcome, everyone. I am Stacy Johnson, Manager, Membership and Sponsorship for NCBA CUSA, and welcome to our second seminar in the month of February, really paying attention and honoring Black History Month. So we wanted to continue the conversation from the week before. Building Black cooperatives, barriers, challenges, and opportunities for entry. We all know that in current pandemic times, there has been a large influx of small businesses. Many African Americans have started businesses over the last 2 years. And so we want to talk about, understanding what's the value of cooperatives. And in taking a look at that, we want to look at what are the barriers to success when it comes to starting a cooperative. Something that you all may want to research later is just looking at, in these days and times, and looking at community and sustaining community, we understand that cooperatives are a very good measure to do that. And one of the largest cooperative societies in Spain, the Mondragon group, they are a perfect model, and there's a lot of information regarding how they have fared over the pandemic, given they are one of the largest cooperative societies. So something for you to take a look at. But joining us today, I'll introduce who our thought leaders are for today. We have Cynthia Pinchback-Hines. She is a racial justice educator and co-op developer with Co-op Cincy. Thank you for joining us. And then we also have Asada Richards, founder and executive director of Sankofa Research. So starting off with Asada, can you introduce yourself and give your bio?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the organizers of this event to have this, what I think is one of the most critical conversations that we could be having on the last day of Black history. And in honor of really the roots and the purposes of Black history, I will introduce myself by really a conversation about my history. So I am the great-granddaughter of J.D. Whitaker, who was a superintendent of Negro teachers in East Texas, and the great-granddaughter of Mary Rowland, who spent her life picking cotton in the fields of East Texas. I am the granddaughter of Naomi Ruffin, who started working in the fields of East Texas to care for her mother, who had asthma at the age of 11, and who spent the rest of her adult life working as a domestic servant in East Texas and in Houston, where she migrated. I am the daughter of Judy Ann, who was a tenant right organizer in Houston and African-American neighborhoods, and the daughter of Sanford Earl, who worked and advocated for men and women who had formerly been incarcerated like himself. I am also the third generation resident of a rich culturally and historic African-American community known as Third Ward. Many people may know this community nationally because it is the home of George Floyd, who we know was murdered in Minneapolis. And I live and work in that neighborhood. Sankofa Research Institute is located in that neighborhood, and it is a neighborhood that has lost more than 25% of its African-American population since the last census. And so it's in a neighborhood that is in a deep state of mourning and also resistance from the loss of community. I have the pleasure and honor of being the director of the Sankofa Research Institute, but I also have the pleasure and honor of being the founder director of the Houston Community Land Trust, this second in the state of Texas. And the first serving urban populations with a partnership with the city. I also am the founding board president of the Third Ward Cooperative Community Builders, the first cooperative construction company in the state of Texas. And as has been said, the founding president of the board for the community cooperative, which is the first urban serving home care cooperative in the state of Texas, and the first that's founded primarily by African-American women and to serve an African-American community, which is an indigent population, of course, outside of private pay. And I am very happy to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Asada. Next up, we have Cynthia Pitchback-Hines. Cynthia?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this occasion. I, as Asada, definitely believe that this is an extremely important conversation that we're having today. And I too have a history that I like to share just a little bit about myself. I am a product of the South. I grew up in Danville, Virginia. And I'm a product of the civil rights movement, during which time, my formative years, I witnessed a lot of disparities, inequities. Of course, you know, a lot of people read about those things, about seeing the signs, whites only, coloreds only. I was a very precocious child, so I asked lots of questions, and none of them satisfied me. None of the answers satisfied me. And as a result of that, I believe that my experiences, my background just informed what I do today, the type of work that I decided to pursue. First of all, my parents were both educators. They were first generation college graduates. They came from very humble beginnings. My mother from a family of 7, my father from a family of 16 brothers and sisters. And I recently found out, this was maybe 2 months ago, that my grandfather was born into slavery. And that, I'm thinking, that's just a generation away. From that, it struck me as being very real, in the sense that that would perhaps explain why I do the things that I think I do today, or have done, have, as I said before, informed my decisions about my career. So I believe education is extremely important. I pursued education following my parents' footsteps. I've always strongly believed that knowledge is power, and that you can take away a lot of things, but you can't take away my mind, my knowledge. So I've enjoyed teaching for years. Started out at 2 HBCUs, really taught at Virginia State University, Delaware State University. And then I went into corporate, primarily in training, organizational development, and diversity management while I was there, looking at, of course, seeing how I could influence what was going on in that arena as well. Came back to higher education and administration at Northern Kentucky University, where I was responsible for the area called, I was Associate Dean for African American Student Affairs and Ethnic Services, recruiting African Americans to that PWI, and of course, as lots of PWIs that are, that lack a certain amount of welcoming of certain amount of grace towards people of color. I help to provide that to our students. And then after that, I kind of, retired, somewhat retired, not ever, I think, doing so for sure. But I came to secondary ed, where I decided, because that was my original certification, was in secondary education, and taught in high schools, and realized that we missed a lot. Something's happened to us as a people, as a community. We're hurting. There's lots of trauma in our schools. So eventually I would be associated with groups and organizations like the Cincinnati Community Health Board, Future Without Poverty, and then Co-op Cincy, where I was on the board for 10 years prior to actually becoming a staff member last year. And so that tells you something about me, how I came to even be where I am today. And as I said before, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me. Look forward to the rest of our discussion.
Absolutely. This should lead into a very great discussion. Thank you again for joining us, Cynthia and Asada. As I stated earlier, kind of in the intro, we know that the last couple of years, we have had a heightened sense of awareness regarding diversity and equity. And we know that there are many people who have left the traditional workforce and starting businesses. And we thought, why not co-ops? So what do you think, or why cooperatives? What do you think is the value in starting a co-op versus a traditional business? Cynthia, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. I think there's several advantages to starting a co-op. One is, and I'll look at it from an African-American perspective again. The Black perspective, I see it as one of our challenges being access to capital. I think there are supports. There are ways to have creative financing through co-ops. In addition to that, I believe the cooperatives allow us to experience decision-making together, because we're forever promoting the importance of working together, working collaboratively. It promotes community as well. That was one of the strong points for me as I made a decision about what I wanted to do beyond my career, my formal career. Where do I want to spend most of my time? And I want to build community. This is one of the best ways to do that. Another advantage is the networks that we are able to draw from, pull from, information, support, because it's not just financial support that we need mentors, mentorship, that again is a part of the community. And of course, as we're looking at cooperative work, we're putting people above profit. So you kind of, looking at the total person as opposed to concentrating on the money. I like the fact that there's pay equity that we consider, as opposed to, of course, the traditional model, which is the people at the very top get the most, and people on the bottom who are really doing a lot of the work and making sure that the business is viable. They're the ones who often don't get credit, do not get to benefit. So they are just some of the advantages that I see.
Awesome. Asada, give us your take on what you think the advantages are to cooperatives.
Well, I mean, I think we see the great exodus, what they call it, the great resignation, right? Mm-hmm. And cooperatives are important to me as a person of African descent, because I'm very much in touch with the deep trauma that people of African descent have experienced historically in this country, right? Our introduction into this country was for labor, right? Was to fuel an economic system to benefit people at our disadvantage. And I grew up watching how hard my grandparents worked and to still die in practically poverty, right? And so for me, as someone, as a single mother who was in the workplace, always just holding on, right? And as someone that earned a PhD at a Research One university, entered the academy as a professor, right? It should have been the happiest time of my life, but that was a continuation of the trauma that I experienced even as, you know, a marginalized person in the labor market. And this trauma is universal in the Black community, right? I said this to someone, I think the saddest moment for Black people is probably around 3 o'clock on Sunday, where we say to ourselves, I gotta get ready to go to the plantation tomorrow. The fear rises up within us, right? Because of the sheer hostility and the sheer terrorism that we face on jobs and in places of in corporate America, the most vicious places, right? And so for me, cooperatives offer a holistic way in which we can work and we can be, because we can't repair the damage of white supremacy. We can't repair the damage of oppression on a part-time basis. Cooperatives allow a holistic way of treating the social, emotional, physical, spiritual traumas that happen to Black people. And so for me, cooperatives offer that model that I can deeply invest in my community. I can deeply invest in individuals in a way that has a group benefit. And I also want to say, you know, in mourning the loss of Bell Hooks, and one of her favorite quotes is that, you know, the Black elite, you know, try to convince the Black community that capitalism, Black capitalism is liberation, right? And so for me, cooperatives offer a way to really resist the notion that individual accumulation and individual knowledge and getting degrees and getting training is going to save us, right? And so for me, cooperative is that community wealth building model. How do we support individuals as well as support the community simultaneously, right? How do we do so in a way that honors, like my grandparents, I say their name because they should be honored. They should be honored for what they have done in this place and in this country. And so when I work with Black and Latinx women who have a CNA or, you know, who work as providers, I'm honoring them. I'm honoring the beauty, the majesty, the creativity, the resilience, the love in them. And I finally want to say, I went to cooperatives not because I was trying to save somebody else, but because I was trying to save myself. This society was killing me. It was eroding the best that I had inside of me away. And I needed to work in a way that was reparative, that was regenerative, so that I could give the best of myself and I can support those in my community in giving their best as well. So for me, cooperatives are a life and death proposition. They're not an elective. They're necessary if I'm going to survive and if my community is going to survive the tyranny in which it faces every day.
Awesome. I mean, and I think, as you said, with the Great Resignation, I think that was the feeling a lot of people had, is that, you know, there's more to this. I could be doing more. I could give more to my community. I can restore myself, my soul, in what I've been doing for the last 20, 30 years, or whatever the case may be, however long they've been working in, you know, corporate America, in our capitalistic society. So I think that those are all very good points. In talking about that, what would you have as far as insights in starting a co-op? I know, Cynthia, you all at Co-op Cincy, you have a very good program in starting co-ops. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, or kind of give us some insights on what you think is important to know on the onset of starting a cooperative?
Yeah, just based on my experience so far, I would say there are a couple of things to consider starting a co-op, and knowing about them is the first. Educating yourself. Just, you need to understand what it is. And we at Co-op Cincy have two programs that we, really three different ways that we look at starting a co-op. Well, two. We call it Co-op U, where it's a formal program, 14 weeks of training from soup to nuts. It's what we do. We cover everything from, what you need to know in the beginning, an orientation, to the financing, profit and loss statements and all that. And the 14 weeks is very intensive. It involves homework every week. We have assignments that are in real time. We have the participants who will go out and actually, sit down with customers or potential customers and do marketing questions. We have questionnaires and surveys and all. It's a very eye-opening experience for the businesses that participate, because a lot of them come in thinking that it's very similar to, and it's somewhat similar to traditional, but very different at the same time. I mean, just as, again, if we're promoting community and understanding that, then if you come in with the mindset that this is going to be the cure-all, first of all, or this is going to be easy because it's a co-op, everybody gets along and that's the way it goes, and we don't have to really consider some of those business matters, then that's where I think we may fall short. However, because we are cooperatives, we do want you to succeed. We want your businesses to work out. And so we provide support for that as well. As I said before, the mentoring and so forth. And at the end of that 14 weeks, if it's Co-op U, which is open to everyone, and then there's Power in Numbers, Black Co-op U, which has the same, basically the same information, but we're looking at it from a different lens, from the African-American perspective. Then at the end of those 14 weeks, then you may still decide that, well, I'm not quite sure if this core thing's gonna work for me because I'm not ready to do these things. I'm not ready to share, I'm not ready to, to embrace a lot of these principles, then that are important to be successful in cooperatives. But those who do embrace them, there's nothing like it. I mean, there's absolutely nothing like it. We've had so many successes already. We've only had 2 sessions of Power in Numbers, Black Co-op U. And from those, we have produced 6 businesses that are, at different stages, but some of them are up and running, loans that are accessible to them, or other creative financing that's accessible that they would not have had they gone on their own, the type of feedback and support again. And that's what I see, in my research, that cooperatives actually do better and during these times, tough times, cooperatives do better overall, almost twice as better as traditional businesses. So that's something to consider as well. But starting them up, you have to know what they're about. What type of co-op do you want to be? And there are different types. What are you expecting in terms of, what are your expectations? Yes, what are your expectations? Are they realistic? And we can cover all those things and then also supply that help for you. And what's great about Co-op Cincy is that once you're through that 14 weeks, we still commit to supporting you through your launch, beyond the launch. We do that. And then there's this other program that I just want to mention really quickly, because for traditional businesses, let's say if you already have a business, but you're wanting to change to a co-op model, we have an excellent example of that right now. It's a store. And I'll just shout out the name if you don't mind. Our Corner is the name of the store. Been in business 38 years in Lincoln Heights, which is one of the oldest African-American communities in the country. In fact, I think it is the oldest north of the Mason-Dixon line. But at any rate, this woman has been in business, or this family's been in business for 38 years. They've decided to give back to the community because the community has been so good to them, and they're expanding. And under their expansion, they will become a cooperative. And we've been already involving some of the city well, I don't want to get to too many details because things are kind of early yet, but we're involving others outside and that can also help. They see the importance of this particular business in this community and they want to invest in it and they want to make sure that it's successful. Business Legacy Fund helps do that, helps to transition a business, a traditional business to the cooperative model. This particular one, though, decided they wanted to do power and numbers first and then expand to the Business Legacy Fund, which also provides support. And then we provide what's called a management certificate as well to these facilitators who come in and help to run businesses that's, let's say, left by folk who no longer want to run the business themselves, but turn the business over to their workers. So we have lots of different arrangements and ways that we can actually help people get off the ground and get a business running.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, a couple of the points you mentioned is one, understanding and knowing what a cooperative is and what kind of co-op you want to be. But also when you talked about the power in numbers, your program there, which specifically targets the African-American community, we know that finding capital is very important in that. So for those of you who are on who may not have watched our seminar, webinar last week, please go back and take a look at that because we really focused on capital and the programs and why it's important to look at it and view it different. Again, many of us don't have the generational wealth where you can ask somebody to loan you $40,000, $50,000, whatever it takes to start. We don't have that ability. We have some things that are very different. So for all those who haven't seen it, you're welcome to go back and take a look at that. And you can find that on our YouTube channel. But also, Asada, tell us a little bit about, you've started Cooperative. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, your journey and what are the things that you have learned or some insights that you would have for people who are looking to start.
Well, I'm in Houston and specifically in the South, and there's a limited number of resources in the South for cooperatives. And then when you cut that by the African-American community, it's even more limited, right? And so for us, we really had to identify the resources and really put those resources together. And it started with a field trip to Cleveland to look at the Cleveland model, right? The Democracy Collaborative work to really get a vision for what was possible. And our work was always rooted in community, right? Was the idea that we had this community that had this need to preserve, protect, and revitalize itself. And cooperatives, through our research partners, even MIT, said, yeah, this is viable. This has potential. But then the question is, where do you get those resources, right? We didn't have a Co-op Cincy, right? We didn't have any large institutions that were supporting cooperatives. And so we really had to begin this journey of learning and really identifying resources. And so, I think, and now let me just fast forward and say, now we have formed what, thanks to the funding of the Solidaire network, we received funding for an incubator accelerator, right? Which is known as We're the Ones. And so now, because from a very grassroots perspective, we were able to form the construction company, the community care cooperative, and now we're working on a credit union as well as on a childcare cooperative. And I want to say what I learned, because there are many different ways that cooperatives form, right? I mean, I don't want to romanticize it, right? It's not always a group of people scrapping themselves together, right? The largest cooperative ICA in the nation was really funded with a nonprofit partner, right? In the Bronx, in New York, right? And so there are multiple ways in which cooperatives come into existence. But I think at the core of it, and I think Dr. Jessica Nemhart talked about this in Collective Courage, is really that study component, right? Where people are coming together. African Americans learn to read, surprisingly, people don't know this, in Sunday school, right? Because Sunday school in the South was where African Americans got together and studied, right? And so she always talked about the power of study groups, right? And so I think one place to start is forming and getting together with a group of people who have some interest in community, some interest in economics, some interest in working together, some interest in providing opportunities, right? So all the cooperatives that I have been fortunate to be a part of started with a group of people, right? Which were the anchors, right? And we met frequently, infrequently, but consistently over time. So I'd say you get you a group of committed people, and then you begin to look for what resources. There are a number of manuals that are out there, right? There are a number of toolkits that are out there, you know, getting together, reading Collective Courage, right? So you can see that you're stepping into a legacy, right? There are a number of videos that are out there. And then identifying, we took a field trip to New York. We met Omar with the Green Collective. We went to, you know, the largest worker cooperative, you know, in the Bronx. We talked to people so we could get inspired and also build relationships, right? And then go to conferences and then really just begin to educate yourself and then begin to find people who have technical cooperative skills, right? So we formed a partnership with the University of Houston. They have done the legal work for every cooperative that we've formed, right? Their law clinic, right? So they help us with that piece, right? And so being very resourceful, being very committed, very dedicated, right? And really working together as a group. I want to say for me, the thing that has carried me is the group, right? That I'm always with a group. It's not me doing this by myself. It's not me trying to make this happen. It's not me. It's a group of people who are bringing their gifts, skills, and talents. I'll just say, you know, we're on the verge of starting business operation for the community care. And I'm in the grocery store at 8 o'clock on Friday. And one of the cooperative owners is on the phone with QuickBooks, right? Like, well, and I'm like, well, she's like, well, I'm trying to figure out which package we need. Now it's 8 o'clock and she has to go to work at 9:30, right? But she's spending her time, right? She's not even being compensated by money, but she's so committed, right? As a single mother, sketching together all of this work, right? And that's the kind of thing that gives me inspiration, right? It's like, and so I would like to say, if you're a group, you know, reach out to people, ask questions. And I'll end with this, the spirit of cooperation among cooperatives. When we went to New York, we cold called people. Like we just got on the phone and was like, we're in New York, you know, we came from Houston, we'd like to meet you. And they were like, sure, can you be here in 45 minutes? Can you be, you know, like the generosity of people to just help us was amazing. And so I'd say get started, stay the course. And my final thing is figure out what your community need is. Don't just start with a passion project. I'm just going to say that, right? I'm not passionate about home care. I'm not passionate about construction. I am passionate about filling the need of my community, bringing economic opportunities, and being able to make sure that people in my neighborhood have work and can live in this community economically, right? And whatever tool that is that contributes to the need, we got elderly, disabled, you know, we have fallen down houses, whatever meets that need, then I'm there, right? And so my passion, I would say people, you know, look at what are the opportunities in your neighborhood or what skill sets that the people you have around you already have, right? Don't start with this like I always wanted to. I'm really gonna push back on that because our job is to meet the needs of our member owners and meet the needs of our community. So I would start with a needs assessment and being able to say what the needs and the assets of my community are as where my entry point into the cooperative economy is.
Awesome. Thank you. That was very detailed and very good information from both of you all.
Yeah,
So,
I had something to that because Dr. Richards, you said something I think is extremely important. Whenever we have applicants for power in numbers, one of the things we've noticed is that there's so many who come in with my business. It's my business. It's me, 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 me. That's the flag right there. It's a flag, especially when we follow up with questions, interviews, or whatever. You know, who else is on your team? No one. It's just me. Okay. This is not necessarily the organization that would be able to help you if that's the case. So you're right. It's the commitment. It's being able to meet the needs of the people in your community. I think that's excellent. Those are excellent points.
Awesome. Very, very
And
excellent.
let me say thank you. Someone was correcting me. I misspoke and said the ICH with the CHCA. So I thank you for correcting me. I was, got my acronyms wrong. So thank you.
Awesome. So, as we talk about it and, you've talked about what you need to do to get started, do you all have any information to share about, kind of the performance during the pandemic? Did cooperatives fare a little better? Some of the research states that, when you look at it, obviously during the pandemic, in those situations, it kept some people working, that in other situations, they may not have been working because it is a cooperative. So do you all have any insight on that?
I'll just start and say, I'm still amazed. When the pandemic started, our construction company really had a strong partnership with a nonprofit that was doing home repairs. We were doing about $10,000 worth of revenue, which was for a small construction company, really extraordinary. And that partnership really dismantled just under the pandemic. Nothing happened, but, just a shift in time and a shift in resources. And so, the cooperative had to shift to, had to be very flexible, right? We started doing things like trash pickup for seniors and, and lawn care, right? And for us, we were in a position to be very flexible, right? To be able to shift our model and to be able to, and then we've gotten into this very interesting thing of really project managing for people, right? People call us and say, my roof or I think my foundation. And so now we've developed this work where we support people and finding the right people, right? And so for me, cooperatives were very flexible and we were able to hold on to people because we were able to give people a sense of connection and community at a very trying time, right? So when we would have membership meetings, even virtually, or board meetings, it was also an opportunity for people to talk about what was happening in their lives, for us to figure out how we can support one another. We had several members who had, parents die of COVID, right? Very profound experiences, and we were able to support those members. And so for me, the cooperative model worked because at a time of crisis, we were able to attend to the needs of the members, the human beings in the business, right? And then do what we could to keep each other going, right? And so the business was really based in keeping connected, keeping the people together. And that meant even if revenue decreased significantly, right? We had people finding other people jobs and resources and housing, right? That wasn't coming through the business, but it was coming to something that I'm gonna talk about at the home care cooperative, conference, the national conference, this social capital, right? That the relationship were able to support one another during the most trying times. And so people didn't exit the business because the business was more than a business. It was a sense of place, a sense of support, and a sense of relationship. So I think at the base of what cooperatives do, they're flexible, they're resource oriented, right? And they're able to respond to what the needs of members are. And that allows for me, the business to sustain. We're still at the rebuilding of the construction company, but it also led way to innovation. So now we're like, let's share board members, right? Why do we have these separate cooperatives, right? Let's do some more cooperation among cooperatives. Let's share resources. Let's really create a multi-stakeholder strategy because we know that's for sustainability. So I'd say we were able to be innovative as well in a very trying times. And so that's been my experiences. And we stayed the course. And I was like, to me, that's so amazing because so much has happened to us and we're still together and we're still moving forward. And I don't think I could have done it if I didn't have, my fellow cooperative members. I wouldn't have made it. So, they're the reason that I'm able to just weather the tragedies and the enormous grief that I've experienced in my community and my own personal family to be able to keep going and move forward.
Awesome. Thank you for that information, Ladonna. That's awesome. Cynthia?
Yeah, I mean, she said it all, basically. I agree. And I know that with Co-op Cincy as an organization, we've grown a lot because of during that time, because of, as you mentioned, the great exodus, folk were wanting something different. They didn't want to return to the same old, they were tired of that. So a lot of folk just decided, we'll apply, they can only say no, right? But as you indicated also, the idea of flexibility, the creative thinking that comes along with more than one, when you have that support system, it makes a huge difference,
Awesome. So as we talk about that, what do you, if you're a small business owner now and you want to make the transition, and I'll ask each of you, just give us, what are the top 3 steps you need to take to kind of make the transition from where you are into cooperative space? We kind of talked about it, but I think maybe a layout, top 3 steps might be a good space. Asada, you have some steps?
Yeah, I would say the technical piece, right? There's a lot of literature on conversions. So if you are a, sole proprietor, there is a model that's called the conversion model, right? And so the technical steps are there. I would also look at any legal resources that exist in your city or in your state around cooperative ownership, right? Because the cooperative business model is really something that's regulated and designated in state statute, right? And so what it takes to be a cooperative, what it takes to be an official designated cooperative is in state law, right? And so being able to see what resources exist. And then I would also, if you have employees, I would, be curious, right? To say, what would it look like if, you move from being an employee to a co-owner? Had you ever thought about that, right? Because, to make the conversion, you have to have some member owners, right? And, you got to think about who you're going to share ownership with or transition ownership to, right? Are you thinking about selling the business and to a group of owners? Are you thinking about, really sharing the ownership? And then I would really look at what cooperatives mean. I would ask myself the deep question, can I share the financial decision-making and the profits with a group of people, right? Am I okay with not having the final say in everything? Because I want to be honest, the socialization of individualism, and even because we're talking, specifically about the Black community, the boss mentality, right? I'm a boss, right? That kind of romanticism, has a lot of attachment to it, right? My socialization, didn't make it hard for me, right? I've always been in groups. I don't mind sharing power. And I'm not saying if you're that person, you can't change. Just know it won't be easy, right? Giving up power and sharing power. You really have to, can I trust people? Not can I trust them like, will you not do me wrong? But can I trust you to be your best? Can I, invest in you and, go through some disappointments? I would say that thinking about what cooperatives are and then asking yourself and doing an inventory, am I ready for this adventure? It's rewarding. It's the best thing that I've ever done. It gives me the most meaning of everything that I've done. And I've done a lot of amazing things, but nothing compares to being with a group of people in this way that's equitable, that's just, that's reciprocal, right? I want to say that to you, but then get some technical resources, think about the finances of it, and then take your time, start thinking about it as a journey. And it may take you a little time to get to that transition, but I'd say, having that conversation with yourself and then looking at what it would take structurally to change.
Awesome. Cynthia, anything to add to that?
Geez, not really. Because other than what we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
you know, how Co-op Cincy could help, or if someone were to come in and want off, just not thinking about it much. Important thing for me is knowing what you're getting yourself into before you actually do it. And I think you've covered it, Dr. Richardson. It's like, you have to do your homework. Even before you come to us, we would want you to do your homework, because it's just so much easier when you start, when you know what you're getting yourself into. But to your point as well, the whole idea of trust is something that's within our community, the history, the trauma and everything. It's ingrained. You know, it's a part of it. It's a part of that trauma. It's not being able to trust, not wanting to trust. And that's what I get a lot in terms of feedback when I'm sitting down with people one-on-one. Okay, you need to have a team. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't trust this person. I don't trust that person. It's something that really need to consider. And even if it means that, and I think that's where those meetings and, as you said, groups, because a lot of that stuff is therapeutic. You know, when you're sitting down and you're talking to folks, just having a conversation about it. You know, what's up with you? You know, what's going on? And then for some folks who really don't know and understanding, let us talk about the history. Those are the types of things that we discuss when we are in Power in Numbers Black Co-op U.
Awesome. Well, I mean, you know, within that, and we talk about, you know, the community and being equitable. When you look at this, how does forming a cooperative help in generational wealth? And I'll say it within the community, but within families. Cynthia, you want to?
Yeah. I think in a number of ways, when I interview people about this, you know, I get a lot of, you know, I want to have there to be generational wealth. I'm tired of the cycle, you know, we want to get off this roller coaster, whatever it is, this ride that's just not getting us anywhere. So what I see happening with this is a sense of pride. First of all, there's a sense of pride you get with cooperatives that you don't necessarily get in traditional businesses. There's also that ownership piece of it. I mean, how many times do we really own much of, especially where we work? If you're not the owner, then owning a part is just something that doesn't seem to happen. So this gives us an opportunity to do that. It also gives us an opportunity to pull in, again, in a creative sense, pull in resources that we don't typically reach out to necessarily. We are allowed to, you know, explore a lot more. Just as Dr. Richards mentioned, you know, go visit. You know, this is what I tell folks. I was talking to one of my cooperatives the other day, and there's a woman who, her idea, she started a business. And I said, okay, well, you need to go out, it's manufacturing. Let's look at the same garment, go out and do some shop. She hadn't even thought about that. Let's go out and shop for these garments and actually have some fun, you know, while you're doing it. And then what are the types of things I'm coaching her on, the types of things that she needs to do in order to make sure that her business continues to move on. She's more in the infancy stage because she's actually one who started with a team that the team kind of disbanded. Again, your comment, Dr. Richards, around, does your team really buy into this? Okay. So, you know, reforming the team and all that, you know, you can have your bumps in the road and so forth, but generational wealth is something that can happen with this as well. And not only that, it's sustained wealth, you know, and that's something I think you can get. Don't have to worry about somebody coming in and going, you're fired, you're gone the next day. Mm-hmm. You know, these are decisions that are being made by the team, by the organization.
Awesome.
And I just add, you know, that was a powerful story in our construction company, that we had a cooperative owner who happened to be the mother of a young man who had been incarcerated. And when he got out, you know, and it was powerful because she had been trying to start her own business for years, right? And so we introduced her to the cooperative model, and then she came into the cooperative business. And so she was on the project management team. And so when her son, you know, was was released from incarceration, she was able to get him a job in the construction company, right? And he needed this construction job was important because he had to go see his parole officer. I never forget, he had a car that would overheat, and we're in the South. And so he needed to be done at work by 2 o'clock before it got too hot and the car overheated. You know what I mean? He needed a really flexible work environment. And he worked, he did projects, it went well. And then he got together with some of his friends and created his own construction business, right? And so then we began to subcontract with him, right? We didn't feel any kind of way about it, and so we gave him the confidence. He brought people onto the cooperative, they got some experience, and they decided that they would create their own group, right? And so, we always think about generational wealth, and I always think about the community land trust model, right? So people will be like, about the CLT, right? Your children can inherit the CLT, even though your CLT home, right? Even though you don't own the dirt, you own the structure, right? So that's passed down as an asset, right? Now, cooperative business don't transfer to children in that way. Usually, if you look at the bylaws, right? They have to take out their own membership. But what it creates generational wealth because it creates an opportunity. And so often Black people are like, I need to find, do you have a job? Can you get, they never control the means of which of opportunity, right? And so if you have the cooperative model, you have something in which your children can be a part of, right? And then the resources and the knowledge you have, you're able to invest it. I tell my son, I was a single mother in high school. And I spent all my excess resources sending my son to good schools to the best of my ability, went to the friend's school, he did piano lessons, ballet lessons. And I always told my son, you're getting everything I have now. Don't even think about when I die that I'm leaving anything, because I'm not. That's not my model, right? I'm giving you everything now. You will have a house because it'll be in the CLT and you can live here if that's what you want, right? But I'm not saving any discrete resources to give to you individually. I'm going to give it to the family and I'm going to give it to the community. And then when you need something, you can come back to this neighborhood that's strong and resilient, right? I'm leaving you a neighborhood that can support you in your aspirations. So for me, generational wealth is created in the community, right? I don't want him to be waiting on no stuff that I'm going to give, because I'm going to use all my stuff now for the community so it can be resourceful, because I don't know what that one son is going to do. And I love my son, he's a great son, but I'm not saving up for him. I'm investing in this strong community so it can support as many sons as possible. So we create generational wealth because we create a regenerative community and neighborhood and economic system that can serve so many, and not just the ones that are in our bloodline, right? I love not just people who I'm directly related to, but the people who've contributed to my life in so many amazing ways. And so I say we need a new model for creating generational wealth, which is outside the individual asset accumulation model, right? How do we create a good foundation for our neighborhood that gives back and creates resources for many?
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. What an inspirational conversation this has been today. I could listen to you all day. I really could. I really appreciate the opportunity of being able to share space with you today, and for us being able to share that information and knowledge with the broader community. So thank you so much for participating with us today. It has been a wealth of knowledge dropped in this webinar today, and I really am impressed with that. One, let's see, I think you all did so well in answering the questions. Let's see what we have. We have a question. Someone asked a question regarding specifically, speaking of housing, how can we address the concern and possibility of gentrification when food co-op moves into a neighborhood? Now, I will say this, we have a total of about 6 minutes left. So this is going to be a real quick response. This is the firing round for you all. So a quick response, and then we're going to close out after that. Any thoughts on that? So the next question in that was, how can food co-ops be protective to the existing community within their bylaws and operation if they can't control rising rent prices? So You got about a
Well,
minute to answer.
I mean, I think it's the combination, it's the solidarity economy, right?
Mhm.
So it has to be part of an ecosystem. Cooperatives by themselves are not going to save anybody, and they're going to save communities, right? So you need a credit union for financing. You need the community land trust model or some shared ownership model for land, right? Because if the grocery store was then put on the community land trust and had permanent or long-term affordability, right, that would control some of the costs of the grocery store, right? And so I think part of this is addressing the kind of economic system that we're in and how all these forces align. And so when you do this work, you have to be, again, thinking about the entire context, right? You know, what's fueling the cost of land or prices in this neighborhood? Do we have anything that has, our community land trust has an agreement with the taxing entity, right? That says that you're only taxing the improvement and not the land, right? That creates permanent affordability. So those kind of strategies, or maybe having a 99-year lease. A lot of nonprofits have 99-year lease with property owners, right? They're not a community land trust, but they see this as a common good, right? So it's being creative in that way and thinking about the long term. And if you think, and I'm gonna say this, food costs have been problematic because they've really sometimes been to feed the lifestyle of wealthy and aspiring people, right? So if your base of membership is not people who are economically challenged at the inception, right? And don't just care about granola. But I mean, I'm being exaggerated. I mean, I'm exaggerating. But anyway, you have to think holistically about the needs of a community if you don't want to exacerbate a problem and not just a niche in the community.
Right, and I also think you need to, in addition to that, get to know, especially if you have a community or leaders, invite them in. You need to invite your council people, the folk who are making those types of decisions as well, into the conversation sometimes to let them know that this is what's going on and how what you're doing as a community or as cooperatives, how it's benefiting that. And I know that sometimes things don't always go the way that we planned. But if we're thinking community, the more people get involved with those conversations, you got to show up. We have to show up, and we have to speak out. And that's one of the things that we really, really, really push is showing up and finding out when are they having the meetings, when are the community meetings happening. I think there are 51 or 52 different communities within Cincinnati, who have their own respective leadership. And so we have to know all of those folk, invite them all into the conversation.
Awesome. Ladies, thank you so much for all of the information that you have given us today. The conversation was awesome. For those of you listening, we dropped a lot of links in the chat as they were speaking. So if you want to go and follow those links, you can save your chat and then you'll have the access to those links. This webinar will be, you'll be able to view it again. If you need to view it again, it will be up on our YouTube page. So that will be coming up. If you all are members and you are not signed up for the Co-op Weekly so that you can stay on top of these educational sessions that we do, please go in and sign up for Co-op Weekly with NCBA CUSA so that you continue to get all of the information that you need. Dr. Asada, one quick question. People want to know how they can follow you.
Oh, that's a good question. I think at Sankofa Supernova is one of my tags. You can find me on Facebook, Asada Richards, and then Sankofa Research Institute. But please email me. That's a good question. I'm gonna be prepared at the conference though. How you can follow me? I don't feel like I'm really doing that much for you to. I mean, I'm doing a lot, but anyway.
Awesome.
But I'll be ready for the follow you question. But please just reach out to me if you want to get connected to me. Don't follow me. Be with me. Connect with me.
And Cynthia, Co-op Cincy, I know they can go to the page there. Is there another way to follow you?
Right. Well, that's about the best way. I am not as social and whatever. But I will tell you this. I want everyone to go to Co-op Cincy just to make sure you keep in touch with not only what we're doing, but all of the different opportunities that are out there to learn more about cooperatives. We have symposiums, we have workshops and all kinds of things and events that are upcoming. We have an event tomorrow evening. In fact, if anybody is from the Cincinnati area at Esoteric, where we have one of our cooperatives that will be launching, Queen Mother's Market, which is a food cooperative.
Awesome. Well, ladies, again, thank you so much. This was a very powerful session. We appreciate the opportunity. Everyone, thank you. And we look forward to doing this again in the future. So thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.